Hello, everybody. This is the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and now presents a reading of articles and features from the New York Times. Today is Saturday, January 31st of 2026. Your reader is Joe Gibbs. How has everyone been doing? The thaw has not happened. It has been absolutely freezing. And we're just going to go over some stories today. We have to get things rolling. How about a headline from history? Basketball bribery stirs storm. This was from January 31st of 1945. Kings County, New York. Grand jury was expected to hand down indictments in a bribery case that involved Brooklyn College's basketball team. The Times reported 5 athletes had admitted to accepting $1,000 with a promise of another $2,000 from 2 men, Harvey Stemmer and Henry Rosen, to throw a game against the University of Akron. The scandal reverberated across the nation. One athletic director in Kansas said he has been warning coaches that professional gamblers were getting their hooks into college players. The Brooklyn students were expelled. In May, a jury found Mr. Stemmer and Mr. Rosen guilty of conspiracy to cheat and defraud. The Times wrote, Judge Louis Goldstein said the conviction put chiseling and crooked gamblers on notice. New York City is not a safe place in which to operate. That is definitely something that happened a lot. I believe back in the day, Henry Hill had something to do with Boston College doing a lot of the same things. So let's look at some fun facts of interest. In 2020, wildfires on Kangaroo Island off the coast of South Australia killed about half of roughly 50,000 koalas there. Animals such as guana lizards, cheetahs survived the blaze by staying in their burrows. 50,000 koalas. Another fun fact, the hit Canadian TV series Heated Rivalry was subsidized in part by tax revenue through a policy seeking to preserve Canada's distinct cultural creations and protect them from getting swallowed up by the U.S. entertainment industry. This says this is what's the secret sauce in steamy Heated Rivalry. Canada A8. Another fact, the Panama Canal handles an estimated 5% of the world's seaborne trade. Okay. Moving on, Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building outside Minneapolis. The headquarters of government's immigration operation is on government property that is the site of Dakota's tribe origin and the center of its spiritual world. And it looks like the final one here. Photographers at the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show cannot use a flash when dogs are competing in their agility event. And, I do see one more. With massive energy outages, a collapsed tourism industry, and a falling population, Cuba is undergoing its worst economic crisis in the 66-year history of the Cuban Revolution. All right. Little section here that says, may we suggest 4 weekend recommendations from around the newsroom? Making a new friend. It's not as easy as sharing your crayons anymore. But as adults, we still have the capability to widen our social circle, even if it takes a bit more effort these days. T Magazine compiled some tips to nurture those relationships, like sending thoughtful care packages or taking the initiative to organize an outing. Expand your orbit, and that is at tmagazine.com. Yes, sounds like a great idea. Put the phones down, get together, and have a good time. Here is another suggestion. Number 2, quitting your job to bake bread. Okay, maybe don't make a massive career change just yet, unless you have a decent sourdough starter on hand, at least. Some home baking operations or micro bakeries are bringing in some serious 6-figure dough, with tangy sourdough loaves at the heart of their businesses. If you're sensing a need, nice pun on words, for change, see what's working for other home bakers at NewYorkTimes.com-food. And there is a nice little illustration of some sourdough bread. Looks very good. Your third suggestion, diving into Sondheim's songbook. Stephen Sondheim's catalog is a daunting one to explore. His lyrics are acrobatic. His chords and melodies twist into unexpected turns. The Culture Desk recently asked its staff and some notable Sondheim fans to recommend 5 minutes of his music that will make listeners fall in love. Their picks span selections from Company, Sunday in the Park with George, Into the Woods, and more. Find your entry point into his avoir at NewYorkTimes.com-arts. In the fourth suggestion, rediscovering a Gothic classic. A new generation of romance readers is embracing Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, ahead of a steamy film adaptation starring Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. Sales of the novel more than doubled in 2025 compared with the previous year. Before Brody Winslow characters hit screen, pick up a copy of your own, or perhaps dust off the edition you were assigned to read in high school, and venture to Thrushcross Grange and see how other readers are dissecting the classic in their book clubs and group chats at NewYorkTimes.com-style. And now we have a little thing here on the same page. It's called Second Look, Up in the Air. And there is, oddly enough, a nice cartoon illustration of people that appear to be at a radio station, speakers behind them, the microphone hanging down, a lot of records in the case, and a nice picture behind them. This says, the Trump administration cut over $500 million last year in annual funding for public media. For a moment, it seemed as though the end was near for NPR, PBS, and other TV that relied on the funding. But more than 6 months after the funding cut, our media system is largely intact, thanks in part to private donors and strategic business decisions. It's a promising outcome, though many experts warn that the efforts are only a stopgap, as these stations withstand the whiplash. Could be a long-term solution in sight for funding that can last beyond changing administrations and political whims. And here's a little story. This says, here to help. This is different. There is a picture, an illustration of slippers and some other things here. Looks like some cleaning products and things like that, soaps, little brushes. This says, how to restore shearling slippers to their fluffy glory. The best shearling slippers are toasty, breathable, and built to last. But as any shearling slipper wearer will tell you, after a few seasons, things can get pretty rank. Follow the easy steps below to refresh your beloved pair. From Carolyn Mullen. Brush out the shearling lining. If your slippers have removable insoles or laces, take them out to make this part of the job easier. Apply a stiff, dry brush to the shearling to remove loose dirt and debris. Dry brushing also begin to gently break apart matting. Don't forget to brush into seams and crevices. Next, gently clean the shearling in a small bowl. Mix together 1 part wool-safe detergent, like Eucalyptus Delicate Wash, to about 4 parts filtered water, or follow the detergent manufacturer's instructions. Dip your clean brush into the solution and apply small amounts into the woolly lining. Use short, straight motions to apply a little at a time, blotting dirt away with a cloth or paper towel as you go. After you finish cleaning, dampen another clean rag with a little water and blot the liner to remove the cleaning solution. Then with a dry rag, blot the inside as dry as you can. Once it's fluffy dry, use a brush to fluff the lining. It says next step. Dry brush the outside of the slipper. To tackle the suede outside, start by dry brushing the entire slipper with a medium bristle shoe brush or crepe suede brush. Work in sections until the nap of the suede is noticeably fluffer and more even in color and texture. Depending on the state of your slippers, this step may be enough to improve their appearance. Now it says, if necessary, gently clean the outer layer. For a more thorough cleaning of the outside, make another diluted solution using either suede shampoo or dye-free dish soap. Dip your bristled brush into the solution and apply a light, even layer working in circular motions and focusing on areas with more soil. Get the entire slipper wet to prevent differences in color. Good idea. Last step, finish with a refluff and protective coating. Once the slippers are dry, flush the suede back out with a dry bristled brush or crepe suede brush in circular motions. The suede will regain its original color as you brush. Then apply a suede protectant spray such as Kelly's Water Protector to the outside. Or you can do what would happen in this house. She would buy more slippers. All right, let's go over, looks like we have some news on some stocks and bonds and some different company updates. We did read something last week about the price of metals and gold, and this says, this time, under stocks and bonds, and there is a picture of like a graph showing the ups and downs. Wall Street closes lower as the price of metal plummets. Financial markets churned on Friday as investors tried to figure out what President Trump's new nominee to lead the Federal Reserve will mean for interest rates. U.S. stocks fell, with the S&P 500 down 0.4% after sinking as much as 1.1% earlier in the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 179 points, or 0.4%, and the NASDAQ Composite lost 0.9%. The value of the U.S. dollar rallied, but only after swiveling a couple times following Mr. Trump's nomination of Kevin Warsh. And some of the wildest action was again in precious metal markets, where gold and silver prices plunged following their stellar runs over the last year. Whoever leads the Fed has a big influence on the economy and market worldwide by helping to dictate where the U.S. central bank moves interest rates. Such decisions lift or weigh on prices of all kinds of investments as the Fed tries to keep the U.S. job market humming without letting inflation get out of control. Mr. Trump has been pushing for lower interest rates, which usually help goose the economy, but also can cause higher inflation. A fear in financial markets has been that the Fed will lose some of its independence because of Mr. Trump. That fear in turn helped catapult the price of gold and weaken the U.S. dollar's value over the last year. A long-time assumption has been that the Fed should operate separately from the rest of Washington, so it can make moves that are painful in short term but necessary for long term. To get inflation down to the Fed's goal of 2%, for example, it may require the unpopular choice to keep interest rates a little high and grind down on the economy for a while. The big question is what Mr. Warsh's nomination, which still requires approval from the Senate, means for the Fed's independence. Mr. Warsh used to be a governor on the Fed's board, so investors are familiar with him. That could also mean Warsh is familiar with hopes to continue the institution of the Fed as an independent operator. And while with the Fed, Mr. Warsh criticized central bank buying of bonds to keep interest rates low. Some on Wall Street took Mr. Warsh's nomination as an encouraging signal for still independent Fed that will keep rates high if necessary. Besides slowing the economy, higher interest rates would push downward on stock prices. But Mr. Warsh has also recently been criticized for the Fed's current chair, Jerome Powell, and has voiced support for lower rates. Indeed, Warsh is not the Fed's guy, he's a Trump guy, and shadowed Mr. Trump on monetary policy over every step of the way since 2009, according to Larry Wisman, a strategist at Macquarie Group. This doesn't necessarily mean that Warsh will push the Fed into rate cuts soon, but it could indicate he may be quicker to do so when the time comes. On Wall Street, stocks and metals tumbled as the price of gold dropped 11.4% to settle at $4,745.10 per ounce. Gold's price suddenly ran out of momentum following a tremendous rally, where it roughly doubled over 12 months. It topped at $5,000 for the first time on Monday and was around $5,600 at one point on Thursday. Silver, which had been on a similar jaw-dropping tear, fell even more. It plunged 31.4%. Prices for gold and other precious metals have been surging as investors looked for safer places for their money while weighing a wide range of risks, including a potentially less independent Fed, a U.S. stock market that critics say is expensive, threats of tariffs, and heavy debt loads for government worldwide. The dramatic halt may have been inevitable given how far and how fast metal prices had surged over the past year. Nothing goes up in price forever. I am sure, though, gold and silver will make a comeback, and it is still something great to invest in. So here's a story from the Washington Post: plans cuts to reshape the newsroom. Seems like newspapers are definitely changing, going away. With everything online, you hardly need it as much to get your news or your information. Young people probably don't know what a newspaper is. So again, this says Washington Post plans to cut to reshape newsroom by Eric Wemple, Katie Robertson, and Benjamin Mullen. Article says fewer reporters are being sent to the Super Bowl. Foreign correspondents are being asked to hold off on trips to conflict zones, and editors are being encouraged to experiment with new forms of storytelling. They are signs of things to come at the Washington Post. The Post leadership is expected to announce significant layoffs in the newsroom and the business sides of the paper in coming days as part of an effort to end years of financial losses, according to 3 people with direct knowledge of the changes. But the cuts also appear to be aimed at something else: reorienting the Post coverage. The sports, local, and international sections are preparing to take a disappropriate share of the pain. At the same time, the paper's video journalists, as well as reporters and editors, focus on politics and national security. 2 of the paper's signature coverage areas are expected to become even more central to the company's future. The changes could sharply narrow the scope of the Post. Over the past century, the outlet evolved from a scrappy metro newspaper into a general interest national news powerhouse that cracked Westgate and covered far-flung countries as well as sports, fashion, dining, and travel. The cuts are intended to direct the Post resources to topics that executives believe better align with the newsroom areas of expertise and reader interest, and in formats that people increasingly turn to for information. One of the people said executives devised their approach after studying the digital traffic to the organization's coverage. The hope, the person said, is that the moves will help make the paper self-sustaining. a goal set long ago by its owner, Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder. The company has lost hundreds of millions of dollars in recent years. The newsroom, including many editors, remains largely in the dark on specifics of the staff reductions and the long-term plan of the organization. Last year, the Post completed a round of buyouts that trimmed the newsroom by dozens of journalists. In the months since, many of the journalists who remain have grown increasingly frustrated about the lack of clarity from Mr. Bezos and the paper's publisher, Will Lewis. So looking at an illustration here, it says the Washington Post. You have all these computers and books and people working in the office, all their artwork and all their things in their cubicle. Some have team things up, basketball hoops. You could see TV flat screens hanging in the background, offices with windows. It looks like a nice picture. This says it's the Washington Post in 2017. Many in the newsroom remain in the dark about the specifics of the upcoming changes. So back to the article, it says some of the staff members have raised concerns on social media in recent days that looming cuts would affect the Post quality and journalists from the international and local sections after circulated letters to Mr. Bezos. Keep the Washington Post a place that covers Washington, the Metro staff wrote in an appeal to Mr. Bezos. Watergate started as a local story, they added, as a representative for the Post declined to comment. In early November, senior editors at the Post became aware of imminent cuts in the newsroom that could affect up to 200 people, according to two of the people who were briefed on the decision to reduce staff. That's a lot of people. Those fears came into a sharper focus this month when senior editors began modifying reporting assignments and travel plans with little or no explanation. Changes that were viewed as a precursor to widespread layoffs. Last week, editors on the foreign desk issued a directive restricting correspondent travel to high-risk zones beginning February 1st. Journalists pelted their managers with questions and received few details in response. Over the weekend, roughly 60 members of the Post International Desk sent a letter to Mr. Bezos, essentially pleading for their jobs. Cutting this deeply sourced, battle-hardened, and tireless staff would hinder the Post's ability to respond to the biggest news developments on the horizon, they wrote. Last Friday, tremors reached the Post sports deck, which was prepared to send reporters to cover the Winter Olympics in Italy. Editors had already paid $80,000 for lodging and secured 14 credentials to cover the games when Kimi Yoshimo, a managing editor, sent a terse email that appeared to call things off. We realize this decision and its timing is disappointing to many of you, so please reach out to me if you want to talk this further. Oh, I'm sure they will, Mr. Yoshino wrote. Days later, the Post decided to send 4 journalists to Italy. The sports desk is also scaling back in-person coverage of the Super Bowl and received instructions not to book travel for beat reporters to cover the Washington Nationals baseball team at spring training in Florida. Mr. Bezos has not responded publicly to the letters from reporters. The creeping anxiety in the newsroom was not part of the plan. During last summer's buyout, Matt Murray, the Post executive editor, confided to a colleague that next time staff deductions were required, he would opt for layoffs instead of buyouts. Layoffs, Mr. Murray argued, would be painful but quick, decisive, and devoid of trauma, recalled Glenn Kessler, who formerly anchored the newspaper's political fact-checking enterprise and took a buyout last summer. And that is the end of that article. This seems to be happening everywhere. And again, with so much out there in terms of social media, it's very difficult to have a newspaper that's really that influential anymore or that matters as much. With all the news on social media, it just seems to be going away. So here we have some letters. And this is letters to the editor. It says, "In science we trust, or do we?" To the editor. "If science keeps changing, why trust it?" By Eli Sheck, opinion guest essay. This was from January 7th. Professor Sheck offers a thoughtful argument for what he calls disciplined trust. In science, a position that avoids both naive faith and unfounded skepticism. To regain public confidence in science, we would add that earning such trust depends as much on how science is communicated as on how it is conducted. Public mistrust of science accelerated during the COVID pandemic, when changing guidance was viewed by many as either deceptive or revealing feet of clay. In fact, those changes reflected science working as it should, responding to new evidence virtually in real time during an emergency. To rebuild trust, scientists and public health leaders must communicate not only scientific facts, but also the process of science itself, testing, revising, questioning, and learning when science or public health guidance changes. So it says when science or public guidance changes, explanations should begin not with "we were wrong," but with "new evidence now shows." Revision is not a weakness of science, it is a fundamental to its process and clear communication of this mark of integrity. Disciplined trust grows when science openly and consistently shows how it arrives at its conclusions. This says it was, the writers are respectively a professor of medicine and a professor of radiology, Weill Cornell Medicine. There's another letter here. This says, and this is interesting because I think this is pretty much a thing of the past, "Old days of cursive." To the editor, in New Jersey, cursive becomes a requirement for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. That's very good to hear. The news article was from January 22nd. In 2nd grade, I moved from Los Angeles to Chicago. My new teacher told me to write my name on the blackboard so the class could learn it. As my chalk scratched along the board, the class began murmuring behind me. I knew I'd done something wrong, but I didn't know what. As I finished and hurried back to my seat, the teacher pointed to my name and told the class, "This kind of writing is called cursive. You'll learn it in 3rd grade." It was 1947, and I'd been taught cursive from the beginning. I've never understood the sense of waiting to teach children a faster method of writing. Susan Sussman from Ventura, Florida. This says, in public school, I spent hours a day perfecting my script, which I took much pride in. Today, I have to print the birthday cards I write to my grandchildren because they don't know how to read my cursive writing. Please bring it back. That was a little something about cursive from Monique Shabar from Brooklyn. So here's a little something from the weather report. National forecast. A rapidly strengthening storm will produce powdery snow that will be prone to blowing and drifting in a large part of southeast states today. A blizzard will unfold near the North Carolina coast as the storm brings snow and slippery travel as far to the west as Tennessee and to the south as Georgia. The heaviest snow with areas of 6 to 12 inches of accumulation, will fall in North and South Carolina. They never get 6 to 12 inches of snow. That will shut them down for a week. I can't imagine them getting 6 to 12 inches of snow. Parts of southern Virginia will receive heavy snow as well. Due to very dry air to the north, a sharp edge to accumulating snow is forecast in the Mid-Atlantic and New England, where most of the snow will be confined to Delmarva, New Jersey, and southeast New England coasts, as well as eastern Long Island and New York. As the storm strengthens, high winds along the coast will create harsh conditions. I hate to see the Patriots get stuck in New England this weekend. Elsewhere in the east, showers will mark the arrival of Arctic air in Florida that is forecast to bring the lowest temperatures in decades by Sunday. Some snow and ice will slowly advance to the east from Montana to the Dakotas, Nebraska, and northern Kansas. In the west, most areas will be dry and rather warm for the last day of January. Highs will be in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in Southern California. Clouds and some showers are in store for western Washington. It says focus, hard freeze for central Florida. The coldest air of the season will spread across Florida this weekend. Temperatures early Sunday morning are expected to reach the freezing mark all the way into interior South Florida. Temperatures will drop into the mid-20s across a large portion of central Florida. Whoever thought you would hear that? So, from the New York Times, Saturday, January 31st to 26th, on the Saturday News, the actress that you might know from Home Alone and many other things has died at 71 years old. Catherine O'Hara, and there's some illustrations here from some of the movies she did, and then there's another illustration looking that this must have been Home Alone 1. She looked very young. Macaulay Culkin is very young, and she's on the set of Home Alone. There's a huge article from page A1 from the Times, and continuing on A17, all about her life, all her career, and all the way up to the end. Unfortunately, Hollywood lost a very good actress and very well known from everybody. So, with the Super Bowl coming up in a week, there is an article here about some football, and it is about inside the voting for the Hall of Fame. It could be very political, and there is an article here by Dan Pompei for the Times. As a member of the Board of Selectors, it is an honor to vote for and help determine each Pro Football Hall of Fame class. But more than that, it is a serious responsibility. We are asked to make it the best, purest Hall of Fame possible. I've lost sleep thinking about who to do that. It is not just about meeting and voting. It is about researching, studying, listening, and trying to understand impacts relative to other impacts. The process never ends. It's like the NFL draft in that as soon as one class is voted on, the work for the next begins. Then we try to look at candidates with fresh eyes and different perspectives, asking whether we missed anything or were wrong about anything. In 2007, I was appointed by the Pro Football Hall of Fame Board of Selectors at the Chicago Representative. The selectors are made up of one group from each metropolitan area that an NFL team calls home, 2 for Los Angeles and New York, and 18 at-large members. By my definitions, there are some gray areas. The board is made up of 24 writers who are employed by independent websites or newspapers, 11 retired or partially retired journalists, 6 broadcasters, 4 Hall of Famers, Tony Dungy, Dan Fouts, James Lofton, and Bill Polian, 3 team website employees, and 1 former league employee, and 1 producer for NFL Films. The composition of the selectors changes each year. The Hall's board of directors reviews the the appointments annually. The directors feature prominent business leaders with ties to the Canton, Ohio area or to the Hall. Directors include the Hall of Famers Warren Moon, Anthony Muniz, Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, right, and Ed Policy, the Green Bay Packers president, and the team owners, Gail Benson, Brian Glazer, Jerry Jones, and Amy Adams Strunk. The directors, under the guidance of Jim Porter, the Hall's president and chief executive, determine voting guidelines. Voters have no say in the process except for the opportunity to voice their opinions to Porter, who welcomes input. Every summer, the selectors are presented with a list, usually of more than 100 modern-era candidates, and then asked to make a series of reduction votes to 50, then 25, then 15, and by the end of the year, there are 15 modern-era finalists. In the fall and early winter, voters often receive pitches, phone calls, and promotional material from other teams, fans, and friends of candidates. Voters talk privately about candidates, and they sometimes try to sell those that deem most worthy. To say there is some arm twisting or horse trading would be an exaggeration in my experience. Subcommittees vote on senior candidates retired for 25 years or more. Coaching candidates and contributor candidates, up to 3 senior candidates can be recommended as finalists along with a coach and a contributor. The voters meet once a year as Super Bowl nears. The meeting had been held at the Super Bowl site until COVID forced it to be remote. The sessions have been held by video call since, of course. Before the candidates are vetted, voters are usually reminded to focus only on candidates' contributions to the game, meaning we should not factor in off-field transgressions or off-field achievements. We are also told to keep in mind the Hall's values: commitment, courage, honesty, integrity, and respect. The meeting begins with discussions about seniors, coaches, and contributors. In late 2024, the directors changed the process for electing seniors, coaches, and contributors. The new rules require voters to pick three of five finalists. For any of them to be elected, they need 40 of the 50 votes. It was reported this week that Bill Belichick, the former coach of the New England Patriots, is not being elected this year despite being an 8-time Super Bowl champion. It created quite an uproar. Belichick received 39 or fewer votes, one of which was mine. Belichick's case was unique in that he was overwhelming credentials for induction, but he also had a blemish on his resume, Spygate, which may have prevented him from being a first ballot inductee. Could be. After seniors, coaches, and contributors are discussed and voted on, voters are not told the results. The focus turns to modern era candidates. One voter is assigned to begin with each candidate's discussion with a 5-minute presentation explaining why the candidate is worthy. Then the floor is open. It's a bit like a session of Congress. Some are mostly concerned with promoting provisional agendas, some factions are like-minded, and the majority are independents. The swing votes, some talk too much, some don't talk enough, some viewpoints I can't understand, some of what is said goes in and out of my ears like telephone hold music, but some of what we hear is enlightening. It's not uncommon for information relayed in a meeting to inspire me to rethink how I view a candidate. Sometimes discussions of a candidate can go on for hours. Other times there is no discussion. It can be contentious, but most of the talks could not even be classified as debates. Voters are not allowed to reveal who said what in meetings. Controversy is common this year. It's about Belichick. Of course, always. And there is a picture here of the Pro Football Hall of Fame building in Canton, Ohio. A maximum of 8 people can be selected to be added each year. It is a nice building. I have been there, and it has such great history of football. I love it. The process is challenging partly because we compare apples to avocados and apricots. It's more art than science when trying to determine whether a guard is more worthy of induction than a wide receiver. There are 3 reduction votes for modern era candidates in the meeting, to 10, to 7, and to 5. A modern era candidate must also receive at least 40 to 50 votes to be elected. The voters leave this meeting without knowing who received enough votes or even who the final 5 were. We also do not know how others voted, as the process is conducted by secret ballot and the results are tabulated by Ernst & Young. This year's meeting lasted about 8 hours, which is typical. Some believe voting should be on the record. I would not have a problem with that, though I'm not sure if it would improve the process or change any votes, but it would surely give the social media mob some witches to hunt. I'm like everyone else in that I do not always agree with the results of our voting. Our process is flawed, but there is no perfect way. What is often overlooked is that it is difficult to get 50 people to agree on anything, whether it's pizza, politics, or Hall of Famers. Every year, there's outrage over who doesn't make it, but it's often outrage about 20 candidates who were left out, which is 12 more than the maximum that can be selected. I don't know what's in every heart, but most selectors care deeply about professional football, Hall of Fame, and the process. It shows in preparation and passion, and the stewards of the Hall, Porter, his staff, and the directors want more than anything to get it right. They undoubtedly will consider new ways to do that, given who is missing from the class of 2026. Sounds very involved. All right, so tomorrow, Sunday, well, actually, you'll hear this on Sunday. What are you going to eat? What do you guys want? How about, for the healthy people here, some crispy tofu and cheesy bean burritos? This is in the cooking session of the Saturday Times. And there is a illustration of this burrito or wrap. It says, breakfast for dinner is sadly a thing, but I also enjoy dinner for breakfast. Case in point, these new crispy tofu and cheesy bean burritos from Ifra Ahmed, a morning person can probably pull these together while still in pajamas, but that's not me, which is why I'll make them for dinner and wrap up extras for the next day breakfast. I'll rewarm them in the oven while I make coffee or gently brown them in a skillet. Crunch wrap, Supreme style. Either way, there'll be plenty of hot sauce. This is by Ifra Ahmad, and it says it takes about 50 minutes to make, and it will give you 4 servings. So what do we have here? What do we need? 1 14-ounce block of extra firm tofu, 4 tablespoons canola oil divided, juice of 2 limes, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, 4 tablespoons of ground cumin, 2 tablespoons of fine sea salt, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and 1 teaspoon of crushed red pepper, half a teaspoon ground black pepper, and 1/4 cup of cornstarch, 4 burrito-sized tortillas, 1 cup canned refried beans, vegetarian if preferred, for serving, a 1/4 cup of shredded cheddar, optional for serving, and 1 cup Mexican rice or white rice for serving, avocado slices for serving, spicy mayo, it's mayonnaise mixed with hot sauce for assembly. Here's what we're going to do. And that was a lot of ingredients. So here's what we do. Number 1, we're going to set the tofu on a plate, cover it with a kitchen towel or paper towels, and place a cast iron skillet or other heavy object on top to press it for 15 minutes. 2, in a bowl, tear the pressed tofu into bite-sized pieces. Add in 2 tablespoons of oil plus the lime juice, soy sauce, cumin, salt, paprika, crushed red pepper, and black pepper. Toss lightly together with a spoon and then add in cornstarch and incorporate it into the tofu evenly. Number 3, in a large cast iron skillet, heat up 1 tablespoon of oil over medium-high until it's shimmering, about 2 minutes. Add in half of the tofu and cook for 2 to 3 minutes, stirring only once or twice as needed until the tofu is brown and crispy underneath. Flip with a spatula and cook the other side for 2 to 3 minutes. Transfer the cooked tofu on paper towel-lined plate. Number 4, add the remaining 1 tablespoon of oil to the skillet, and once it is shimmering about 30 seconds, add the remaining tofu and repeat the process. Your 5th step here. Meanwhile, prepare and warm your tortillas and other fillings. Your 6th and final step. To assemble the burrito, spread 1/4 of the beans and cheese onto the center of a warmed up tortilla and top with 1/4 of the rice. Then the tofu and avocado. Drizzle with spicy mayo. Fold the short sides of the tortilla and over the filling. Fold the bottom of the tortilla up and over the filling and tightly roll into a burrito. Serve immediately. It could be good. How about your next dish? And I am looking at a illustration. This says vegetarian chili verde. And there is a bowl of that dish. Looks like there's some wraps on a plate, maybe some lime or something. And this says vegetarian chili verde. A classic chili verde with its hunks of pork shoulder, surrendering to stewed green chilies, sits in you like bittersweet memory. Okay? Happy yet heavy and unmoving. I love it, but sometimes I want all the flavors without the meat. This version from Christian Reynoso captures the tangy complexity of tomatillos by roasting them with deep green poblano peppers before simmering everything with beans and broth. This again is by Christian Reynoso. It only takes 35 minutes and again will feed 4 people. What do you need for this? 1 pound tomatillos, husked and re-rised. 1 large or 2 small poblano peppers, half seeded and roughly chopped. 3 large shallots or 1 medium red onion chopped. 6 garlic cloves peeled and crushed. And it says 1 2-inch piece fresh ginger grated. 1.5 teaspoons of ground cumin, salt, and black pepper. 3 tablespoons of olive oil, plus more for serving, so you need that later. And 2 15-ounce cans beans, such as pinto or navy, drained and rinsed. And 1.5 cups of vegetable broth, flour, or corn tortillas, optional for serving. Lime wedges, sour cream, and cilantro leaves, and tender stems for serving. So here's what we're going to do with that. Number 1, heat the oven to 425 degrees. Cut medium to large tomatillos into quarters and small ones in half and place in a large oven-proof skillet along with poblanos, shallots, garlic, ginger, and cumin. Season with salt and pepper, drizzle with olive oil, and toss. Roast until tender but not mushy, so about 15 minutes. That was your first step. Number 2, meanwhile, place the beans and broth in a medium pot or large skillet. Bring it to boil. And then you're going to turn the heat down to maintain a gentle simmer and season with salt and pepper. Once the vegetables are done roasting, stir them into the pot of beans, and this is number 3, and return to a simmer. Once simmering, season again in salt and pepper to taste, and then turn off the heat. And your 4th and final step, so this is a pretty quick one really, again only 35 minutes. If using tortillas, warm them to serve alongside. Ladle the stew into serving bowls and add a squeeze of lime, a dollop of sour cream, and a drizzle of olive oil if desired. Top with cilantro. So it does look good. It shows the sour cream here. the lime. It looks like a very good dish, a different type of dish for sure. Moving on to another thing to make, something different. And the New York Times definitely, every week I look at these recipes, and it offers a totally different menu than I think everyone's used to having and eating and preparing. So I'd like to tell you guys about different things, something different to try. You get sick of the same old stuff, right? So here is sheet pan gnocchi with mushrooms and spinach, and there is a picture of that dish. Just the basic illustration of the gnocchi with mushrooms and spinach. It says chewy gnocchi, chewy mushrooms, all of it glazed with a creamy horseradish mustard sauce. It says this steakhouse-inspired dish from Ali Slagle is jumping right into my kitchen from a cozy wood-paneled restaurant dining room. This says from Ali Slagle, about 35 minutes, another quick one, and 4 servings. So what are we going to need? We're going to need 1 pound of mixed mushrooms, such as steak, oyster, maitake, or cremini, trimmed and quartered or cut into 1-inch pieces if large. 1 12 to 18 ounce package of shelf-stable or refrigerated potato gnocchi. 6 tablespoons extra virgin olive oil plus more as needed. 4 scallions cut into 1-inch lengths. 1 large shallot, thinly sliced, kosher salt and black pepper. 5 ounces baby spinach, about 5 packed cups. And 2 tablespoons Dijon mustard, 2 tablespoons of prepared horseradish, not sure about that, 1 teaspoon of honey, and 1 teaspoon unsalted butter. So that is your ingredients. What are we going to do? Let's take a look. Number 1, first step, heat the oven to 425 degrees. On a sheet pan, toss together the mushrooms, gnocchi, 5 tablespoons of olive oil, scallions, and shallot. Put that all together. And then you're going to season with salt and pepper, shake into an even layer, and roast without stirring until the gnocchi and mushrooms are golden and crisp. About 20 to 25 minutes will do that. Add the spinach and remaining tablespoon of oil. Season with salt and pepper and stir to combine. Spread in an even layer and then return to the oven to roast until the spinach is tender, another 5 to 7 minutes. That was the first step. You get all that done. On your second step, meanwhile, while that's all happening, in a small bowl, stir together the mustard, horseradish, and honey until they're combined and season with salt and pepper. Okay? Your third and final step, add the butter and half the sauce to the sheet pan and stir until melted and glazy. Eat with the remaining sauce on the side. So another quick one done in 35 minutes, which is not bad. All right. So now we have a few minutes remaining. And there's a couple stories that are pretty long, but I will let you know what's happening here. This one says for world record, all she has to do is hold on. So Bonnie Sumner, she is 81 years old. She is attempting to set the dead hang world record on January 20th. This is her at Woodland Fitness in Woodland Park, Colorado. So there is an illustration of her hanging there. 81 years old, and the clock says 1 hour, 52 minutes, and 29 seconds, and she's still there. There's a huge article about her in the New York Times on section A10 for the Saturday, January 31st edition. It is incredible what this lady has done. She is only 5'4" and she's 115 pounds. She is been doing this for a long time, and this does look like a very interesting article. An illustration. I know I couldn't hang like that. There's no way. There's another article here. It's on A11. This says Teacher of the Year. She fought a book ban, and now she may never teach again. There is a huge illustration of her. This teacher looking at a book. Underneath it says, I would do it again in a heartbeat. And it says, Susan Boismeyer on quitting a teaching job in protest of book censorship. There, on A11, there is a very large article, and it goes into this entire story of what she went through and what she sacrificed, all for the love of books. Looks like she was in Oklahoma, and it's very interesting what some people will do just for what they believe in, and others just look the other way. So this article does seem very interesting. It is very long. It's an entire page, but I did want to mention it. Her name is Summer Boismer, and she went through a lot here for the love of books and the kids and everything else that she felt was important for the situation. So hopefully you guys enjoy your Sunday and maybe try some of those dishes out. It's a good day to cook since it is freezing. And I checked the weather today. Interesting is in Alaska, Kenai, Alaska, it's 35 degrees, feels like 28, and I'm sitting in Tonawanda, New York, where it feels like 0. So it's a little weird that for the last couple days, actually Alaska, which is known for cold, is actually 30 to 35 degrees warmer than the Western New York area, which really isn't really all that surprising, right? So have a great day. I will talk to you next week, again for your New York Times. So you have been listening to the reading of New York Times for January 31st, Saturday, 2026. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your reader has been Joe Gibbs. I thoroughly enjoy doing this for everyone. I hope you enjoy the readings, the recipes, and different stories of interest. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Have a wonderful day and rest of your weekend.